Hello, everyone, and welcome to another installment of TEDXcellence, the show in which I have an eternal quest to learn new things and be a better person. That's why I'm here. And I come to you live from my Corona bunker on the moon with Dog Cat Fox, a Pepperjack, and all of you. Hello, chat. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Saturday. Surreal Saturday. Yes, once again, into the breach, as it were. What do we have today? Well, continuing quest, as I said, to find a reasonable or at least interesting or at least convincing argument regarding restorative justice. But before we get there, a hello to all of you who have decided to join me this morning, or early afternoon, depending on where you are. Jaeger Pony, hello. Pink Hall, the Driving Ape Man, hello. Another Monotream, hello. Somnambule Nation, hello. From the past, and she'll be watching this in the future, presumably. Healer Owned, hello. You're Ridiculous Lunatic, hello. Keever Dan, hello. Asian Hippie, hello. L Wolf, hello. Trucking with the Tablet, hello. Puddock, hello. Edumacated Hillbilly, hello. Or Sean Uli, as you're otherwise known. Disturbing Zen, hello. Mr. Joestar, hello. Or Jocelyn, I believe. Jocelyn. Quinn the Cultist, hello. Johnny Hellcat, hello. That one servant of Satania, hello. Brutus, hello. Eric Grunstadter, hello. Texas Red, hello. Officer Buck, thank you so much. Hey, dude. Hey, dude. For those of you old enough to remember that series on Nickelodeon, hey, dude. Just, dating myself as an old fogey at this point. Jolyn. How did I say? I'm sorry, Mr. Joestar. Renovaccio, hello. Snubberth, hello. Okay, guys. Well, as I say, it is another adventure into the wonderful world of restorative justice. I'm not sure where we're going with this one because the official title is Within Restorative Reach, Redefining How Communities Do Justice. Within Restorative Reach, which is why the thumbnail is titled such as it is, because I may be presumptuous. In fact, I know I am presumptuous, but saying reach exceeds grasp, I'll be happily surprised if that assessment is entirely incorrect. I don't watch these things wanting to be proven right in my suspicions. Otherwise, I wouldn't watch them. I just assume I know the truth without having to, take in a different argument or a different perspective. But all the same, I cannot help my cynicism regardless. Let's see. Crimson Tiger, hello. Subpar Genitalia, hello. Let's see. Mr. Joestar says, Scribbles, the Y is pronounced like E. Jolene. Jolene? Isn't there a song called Jolene? Or a song lyric with that in there? I'm sure there is somewhere. Okay, Jolene. Do I have it right? Hope so. Zaubla! Hello. All right, guys. Oh, Shio Gorath, hello. The Luke Skywalker, too, hello. Hey, Scribbles, what are we in for today? Well, we're in for presumably another iteration of restorative justice. So I've got my bingo card ready. The link is in the description of the bingo card, guys. So have that ready. And also a reminder, as I don't often do, if you share the stream, especially and, exclusively on Twitter, because I only really pay attention to Twitter, but I appreciate any other, social media platform. If you do share it on Twitter, be sure to tag me in your tweet, telling people about the stream so I know that you did it, so I can thank you personally, because I really do appreciate that. All right, so per usual, I'm going to start off with a couple of seconds of sound test. Let's see. Greg Rogers, hello. Let's see. It's a Dolly Parton song. Jolene? Okay, I thought so. I don't remember the song. Anyway, we have a 12-minute, 42-second presentation. So let's get started, guys. You tell me if you can hear this, and if so, we will continue.
When I was in high school, 3 friends and I were busted for having a few coolers before a school dance.
Well, you guys hear that? And we're not even 10 seconds in, and we already have childhood or family anecdote. So I'm circling that on the bingo card as well as free space, because how can you avoid not wanting to give some attention to Dog Cat Fox on the bingo card? Sounds good, says Asian Hippie. High school, 3 friends, says Shiogorath. Old Guy Gamer, hello. Morning. Other people saying Kenny Rogers sang the song. Oh, Joel. I mean, when it comes to country songs, several different artists could have sang the song because they often cover each other quite a bit. So I could believe it. I'm going to have to look it up after the show. Check Your Logic, hello. Your boy Pat, hello. And your boy Pat, happy birthday to your daughter. Be sure to remind us on Lords of the Night tonight to sing to her if I forget to mention it. But all congratulations there. But anyway, guys, all right, so everybody hears that. In high school, she and a couple of her friends were caught drinking coolers before, I think she said, a school dance. All right, so we got a rebel here, guys. We got a rebel. All right, so, given the title of the presentation, is she going to complain about how they were punished for their transgression? Oh, Pepper Jack. Get me ready.
A dance for which I was one of the main organizers as a member of the leadership class.
Oh my, that look on her face like, oh my God, like, oh my God. So you were a leadership class student and you were drinking coolers before the school dance in high school. You were underage drinking coolers. Coolers, or as we used to call it in college, bitch beers. Wine coolers. Yes, I know. It's derogatory and sexist, but that's what we called them. And I still occasionally refer to them that way.
After a talking to in the principal's office, we were suspended for 3 days.
Oh my God. And obviously, since you were suspended in school, that directly led you to a life of crime through the school to prison pipeline. Right? Right.
Our parents were called in to come and collect us in front of the teacher chaperones and our fellow students.
How embarrassing for you. Thank you again, Officer Buck. Female Carrot Top. Well, her hair isn't that red and it's not that crimped. And at least as of yet, she's not pulled out a bunch of wacky props to use as punchlines. So, but it's early yet. You know, there's still 12 minutes left in this. So who knows where this is going to go.
I still remember my mama's hand tightening around mine when one of the teachers who had once taught her and was then teaching me said, "Well, it looks like the apple didn't fall far from the tree."
Oh, snap. Oh, your mom was a hellraiser, huh? Damn. Mom's got some splaining to do.
True story.
I totally believe. Actually, I do. That doesn't sound like some kind of self-aggrandizing sort of story. So that's an anecdote that I don't have any reason to doubt. But again, the night is young, as they say. Thank you. This is Kyle. Hello, chat people and scribbles. Hello, Kyle.
We did our time. We met with the school counselor upon return to class, and we made our apologies to our teachers and our parents.
Well, that's really all you can do at that age. So was this inadequate, or is this a model by which we should operate in the modern day? Let's find out.
But I wouldn't come to understand the impact of our actions until many years later.
The impact of your action. So sneaking some wine coolers before a school dance, the impact years later. Okay. I'm trying to think of like the most extreme possibility, like that one incident led you and or one of your friends into a life of alcoholism, or I don't know. I didn't hear the police were involved in this at all, so you don't have a criminal record. So, yeah, I don't know. What happened?
Over a visit with one of my cooler drinking friends at her family home last Christmas, her mother brought up the incident. We tried to shrug it off. We had a little laugh, what's the big deal?
I would agree. What's the big deal? I'm assuming that you are many, many years outside of high school at this point, at the time that this talk took place. So it was a youthful indiscretion that ultimately harmed no one, and you were appropriately punished and shamed for. I mean, that's subjective, but okay, so yeah. And so what?
Look at how well we turned out.
Yeah.
But the look on my friend's mom's face told us that there was still more that needed to be said.
Okay, so your friend's mother has been sitting on this for, I'm going to say at least, 15 years? I don't know how old our speaker is at this point. I'll be generous. I'll say 15 years. And
she proceeded to tell us how she and her husband, who had been a teacher at the school from which we were suspended, were impacted.
Oh, no. And again, she sat on this all this time. I haven't approached a point where I think she's lying or making up an anecdote or anything. This sounds just ridiculous enough to be true. But all the same, I'm kind of like, what is the mother's story here? Oh, click.
She told us that she had been worried, embarrassed, and disappointed in us.
Oh my God, what a terrible burden to bear over a decade or more. Maybe she needs to get over it, like you and your friend did.
And that stung.
Really? Why?
Even 20 years later.
20? I was being generous. 50. Okay, 20 years after the fact. So high school, dance, leadership. I'm assuming you're like 18 or something. So you're in your late 30s at this point. And just this past Christmas, at the age of, I'll say 36, to be generous again. 36. Some 20 some odd years out of the incident, and your friend's mother is still embarrassed by it. That sounds like a her problem. But let me guess, you internalized this, I'm guessing?
Sure, we'd broken a school rule, a law too, if you throw in the underage drinking piece. However, our actions had a much greater impact on the people in our lives and our relationships with them.
Yeah, 20 years after the fact, when your friend's mom finally mentions this. I mean, talk about holding a grudge.
Now imagine the impact of a far more serious incident or a crime.
Oh, okay. All right. So let's imagine the impact of an actual crime that harmed somebody in some way. All right. I'm going to imagine murder. Let's imagine murder. Just let's take it to the extreme, and if we need to ratchet it back, we will. Okay. Imagine there was a murder. Okay, got it.
Such as a theft, a break and enter, dangerous driving, even violence.
Okay, well, murder, is a result of violence, technically. So, all right. So you didn't minus out a violent crime. All right.
In the little book of restorative justice, Howard Zare explains that a restorative approach to justice extends beyond what rule or law has been broken and who needs to be punished for that, to ask a different set of questions.
A different set of questions? I hear a list coming. But the little book of restorative justice, I've never heard of that before. I might have to look that one up. The little book of restorative justice. I'll get my Amazon account out here after the show.
Who has been hurt?
The victim.
And what are their needs?
Justice and a sense of safety and a sense of balance to the universe.
And whose obligations are these to make things right?
Well, depending on the circumstances, things might never be made right. If someone has been murdered, for example, or let's say someone's been maimed and lost an eye or something to that effect, there's really no solving that problem. there's only punishing the person and making sure that they have as little chance as possible to do that to someone again. And since you mentioned violence, I'm going to hold you to that one as we proceed, because if you're not going to set a boundary, neither am I.
Through a restorative lens, Zaire frames crime first and foremost as a violation of people and relationships.
Not necessarily. If someone breaks into my car and steals my stereo, what was my relationship with that person? A total stranger? What relationship did they violate? I suppose my relationship with a sense of security and trust in the world, but yeah. Are we still talking about crimes ranging all the way from theft to violence? Or do you want to set a boundary for where restorative justice makes sense and where it doesn't? Perhaps.
What matters most is impact, the harm, trauma, and breaches of security, safety, and trust.
What matters most. Okay, so your concern is the victims and their sense of, let's say, balance or emotional or mental safety after such a crime. Your concern is the victims. Okay, all right. Tell me more about how this is centered around the victims.
In her book, Security with Care, the late Dr. Liz Elliott makes a strong argument for why we should consider justice as a human problem.
Well, justice is a human concept, as it is an abstraction. And to the best of our knowledge, we are the only species on the planet that deals with abstractions in any cogent way. So, very good. Justice is a human problem or a human endeavor, depending on how you want to look at it. Great. I'm glad we had this conversation.
So what are the solutions to this human problem?
What are the solutions to this human problem? Well, we've been journeying towards a sense of justice for, I don't know, at least since Hammurabi's Code, let's say. How can we systemize justice amongst human civilizations and societies? Our current criminal justice system is actually the end result, at least at present, because it is always evolving, of thousands and thousands of years of attempts to cordon off those who would harm innocence from the rest of us. So that's what I would say to that. Just a thought.
I can't tell you.
You can't tell us. So there's another 11 minutes to this where you don't know what you're talking about. Okay.
But I know who can.
Okay, well, why don't you have them come up to the stage?
People who are impacted by crime can.
So victims of crime. Okay. Are you a victim of crime? Well, no, you just counted yourself out. So, okay.
Because they are the experts in knowing what they need.
Yes.
And sometimes these needs are met through our criminal justice system.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're not.
True.
And sometimes the very person who can help them meet their needs is the person who harmed them.
Sometimes, I suppose. It would depend on the circumstances of the crime. Like I can imagine, for example, a thief steals something and then returns something. It doesn't make up for the initial theft, but at least it helps to restore the person to where they were before the crime. Or likewise, say, some sort of con artist who steals a bunch of money and then has to pay restitution. And maybe they're made whole somehow. I can imagine scenarios where, sure, the capper to a victim's experience could be the perpetrator doing something to try to make up for it. I can also imagine several instances where there's nothing the perpetrator can do to make up for or to restore the other person's situation. I mean, you're the one that set the extreme end of what you're talking about at violent crime, so I'd love some direct and active examples.
So what if, instead of working to keep people who are impacted by crime and wrongdoing apart, we create opportunities for them to choose to come together in ways that are safe, supported, and intentional?
Okay, why is it? Give me an example of a rape victim and their rapist in such a scenario. I mean, I have yet to hear, so far as I can recall, in all of the restorative justice talks that I've ever listened to or critiqued, I have yet to hear someone give me an active example wherein a rape victim and a rapist were provided a restorative justice environment in which to hash out their differences or something to that effect. Now, I'm not saying that such a thing has never happened. In fact, I'm pretty sure it must have happened at some point. The odds are not in favor of it never having happened. But to this point, no one arguing for restorative justice, either as a replacement for or a supplement to our criminal justice system, has given me an active example of a rapist and their victim meeting or a murderer and their victim's family meeting. Now, I have seen a documentary that talked about the victim of or the victim's family of a murderer meeting with the murderer, and there being some understanding there. In fact, I've heard about several stories like that before. So it's not impossible for that to take place. The problem is, if the victim or victims' families do not wish to participate, what good is a restorative justice system? And especially, what good is a restorative justice system as a replacement for the criminal justice system? Now, our speaker has not said explicitly that she's aiming to replace the criminal justice system with restorative justice. But just as sort of a high-level comment, that's always been sort of the stopper for me. If you're going to mandate this kind of thing or make it part of the process, if the victim does not wish to participate, what then?
There are over 400 restorative justice programs across Canada.
Oh, are we in Canada? Grand Prairie. Oh, it's Grand with an E. I blame Pinkalo just because he's here.
A few dozen here in Alberta, with 2 right here in the Peace Country.
The Peace Country? Wait, is part of Canada like founded by hippies or something?
Face-to-face meetings between people impacted by crime and those responsible for it are happening in our schools, communities, and alongside criminal justice proceedings.
Okay, alongside. All right, so supplementary to, not replacement of. Okay. And in our schools, yeah, when you're talking about kids who are still learning about the world, their brains are still developing and so on, restorative justice practices make more sense in that environment than they do in the adult world. Of course, it all depends on what the offense is and so on. So what happened to you and your friends where you got suspended, you got a little bit of public shame for it, you had to address it and atone for it. Okay, there you go. And I'm presuming you learned your lesson. And I'm also bewildered as to your friend's mom holding a grudge for 20 years, but that's her problem, I guess. So yeah, I'm not dismissing the idea of restorative justice practices completely, but there comes a point at which, especially considering the offenses involved, where it really makes no sense to me, especially not as a replacement. Supplementary to the criminal justice system, I'm a little bit more open to that. But again, I'm still waiting for somebody to give me an example where a rapist and their victim met in a safe space to hash out their differences and restore the relationship or whatever.
They're even happening in our federal correctional facilities.
Okay.
Through the Restorative Opportunities Program, Correctional Services Canada has been facilitating dialogues between people who are victims of serious and violent crimes and the people incarcerated for those crimes since 2004.
Okay, now please provide me, because I'm honestly curious to know, please provide me some information on, I guess, the sense of satisfaction or a review from the victims on whether or not they felt it was productive or helpful. I'm honestly curious to know.
Regardless of time, place, or circumstance, restorative justice is really about creating a safe space for people to voluntarily come together to address any of the multitude of needs they may have in the aftermath of crime or wrongdoing.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that she uses the word voluntary every time, that it does require people to elect to participate. Okay. Because in a lot of the other presentations I've listened to, I can't say one-to-one that they've all said it would be mandated as a replacement for the criminal justice system, but without the alternative or as a supplementary to the criminal justice system, I'm not quite sure how restorative justice works as a replacement unless you mandate participation. So at least in this instance, she's saying it is a opt-in process.
These needs may be immediate, or they may arise months, years, even decades later.
Like your friend's mother who couldn't let go of a grudge over a youthful indiscretion 20 years after the fact.
Needs may include things such as getting questions asked. Questions such as, why me?
Because you were vulnerable and available. Right? Crimes of opportunity. You just happen to be there. I can just imagine like what kind of answer you get that's not going to be satisfying to that one. Why me? I had the urge and you were present. I mean, a lot of crimes are crimes of opportunity. So,
to being heard, receiving restitution, regaining a sense of safety, forgiveness, healing, and closure.
Again, it would really depend on the crime, and it would really depend on the individual. Now, of course, the most recent that comes to my mind and most dramatic example of a sort of restorative justice gesture was the case of, what was her name? Amber Geiger. Amber Geiger was I believe she was a Houston police officer, I think. Anyway, summary of the case. Amber Geiger, a police officer, she showed up to her apartment building, went to the wrong floor in her own apartment building, went to the wrong apartment, although the one corresponding in floor plan to her own, opened the door, saw someone in her quote-unquote apartment, shot that person as an intruder, and only afterwards realized that she was at the wrong apartment and she'd shot the person who actually lived in that apartment. And at the end of the trial during, I believe, sentencing, the brother of the victim asked the judge if he could give Amber a hug and forgive her because that is what he thought his brother would have wanted of her, since it all seemed like some kind of crazy, horrible misunderstanding / accident. And that was completely of that guy's own free will and volition. It wasn't something planned. It wasn't something required of him, obviously. And it was a very powerful moment. It was a very powerful scene. And so I can see the allure of that kind of thinking towards a supplementary aspect to criminal justice. But it all depends on the circumstances. And of course, it all depends on the willingness of the victim or the victim's family to make such a gesture or to pursue such a line of interaction. So I'm not entirely against the concept, but the ones that suggest that the criminal justice system and prisons and police be done away with completely, those are the ones that I have a problem with fundamentally. So far, our speaker hasn't said it should be replaced. So I'm more inclined to be on her side than some of the other speakers in the past.
Restorative justice also acknowledges the needs that people who have caused harm have, which can include a genuine desire to make things right.
Okay, that is true. There are a lot of criminals who are legitimately remorseful for what they've done and want to make amends. Part of that is serving their time peaceably, and then when they get out, never committing such crimes again. Obviously, their credibility is in question after they've committed a crime in the first place, but certainly not every criminal is a hardened monster.
The empowering nature of restorative justice is that it doesn't prescribe what needs or outcomes should be or how people should feel.
Well, maybe not, but in the name itself, there is a push to find some kind of restoration. What are you restoring exactly? Like I say, maybe not in explicit terms, but the concept itself is kind of pushing towards, I don't know, some kind of accord between one side and the other. That's the intention. Now, of course, I guess it can't require that it be successful, but if you're participating in it, that is the stated goal. So maybe not a requirement, but thank you, John Miller. The only issue I can see wrong with restorative justice is when it gets implemented and then abused to just let criminals get a pass and do crime again. Then again, there are criminals that repeat. Criminals that serve their time, get out, and then commit crimes again. Recidivism, it's going to happen. It's just the nature of the beast, so to speak. And that's why I am almost 100% against every proposal of a restorative justice system to replace prisons or replace police officers and so on and so forth, because that doesn't make any sense. It does not make any sense that you're just going to say, oh, well, you did a bad thing. Now we're going to put you in front of a healing circle to talk it out. There's no due process there. A restorative justice system in replacement of police and or incarceration is little better than a well-meaning vigilante mob, so far as I can tell from the arguments I've been presented. And we all know how that eventually ends up. Just look at Chaz and how the security force in Chaz, wholly independent, operated. That is an extreme example, but you're not too many steps away from it in a totally restorative justice process.
What it offers is a supportive environment for people to come together to address these needs and to move forward in a way that upholds the dignity of all involved.
For those that wish to participate as a supplementary process to the criminal justice system, I don't have a problem with it. If victims or victims' families want to participate in such a thing, and a offender, however you might estimate their sincerity, wants to participate as well, so be it. I just hope, this is the one thing that I'm always concerned about, even if it's just supplementing the criminal justice system, that a criminal's participation in such a thing somehow just mechanically earns them some sort of brownie points, some sort of free time or some time off their sentence or something to that effect. Because someone's sitting there in a room with their victims or their victims' families and saying what they want to hear and seeming to be sincere and so on, gets them some sort of benefit just for showing up. That's what I kind of worry about, if there is no incentive other than the opportunity to communicate with your victims, if there's no carrot being dangled from that stick, maybe it would seem more legitimate to me. Like, this is a voluntary process. It does not affect your sentence. It doesn't get you any more benefits and so on. But if you wish to, and you're sincere about it, you can. Now, I don't know how the process works in Canada. She hasn't said yet. Maybe she will. But if it were a system that did not offer an inherent benefit to participation, and participation was its own reward, so to speak, I'd be more on board with that idea.
In its very basics, restorative justice, in its essence, restorative justice is about people talking with and listening to each other and figuring out what to do and how to work through the difficult circumstance that has brought them all together.
Yes, put simply, that is effectively what restorative justice is about. Even though it sounds condescending to say, and I've said it several times, it is a kiss and make up process. Now, I know that's oversimplifying it, and it may be too flippant of a summary, but that's kind of what it is. If you look at it from a school perspective, two kids fighting, shake hands and part as friends, that kind of thing. I know. I'm being derogatory towards the process, but all the same.
Sounds pretty simple, right?
Yeah, sounds simple. A lot of things sound simple. In practice, they're not often so.
In theory, yeah. In practice, not so much.
Okay, well, I at least appreciate your candor in saying that it's not a one-size-fits-all solution.
Restorative justice can be really hard heart work. It can be emotionally messy and downright uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It can take time and be tiring.
Yes.
People may choose not to participate somewhere along the way.
Yeah.
And there can be some really difficult and complex issues to navigate.
Like murder or rape or financial ruin, those kind of difficult navigations.
And it's uncertain in the sense that it can't promise a particular outcome or how people are going to feel when they walk out of a room.
Yeah.
A room that often holds tension, tears, pain, and heartache.
Yeah, it's going to be a gamble if you're going to get anything positive out of it. I mean, for a lot of people, I can only imagine the most you might get out of it is some catharsis by confronting the person who harmed you in some fashion. But then, thankfully, to this point, knock wood, I have not been the victim of serious violent crime, nor have I been a family member to someone who was the victim of serious violent crime. So I can only imagine if I actually cared to.
But it's also in this restorative room that the potential for growth and change beyond what may even be apparent at that time can be put into motion. Because restorative justice also makes room for accountability.
Makes room for accountability? I thought we were supplementing criminal justice. So accountability is already reflective, conceivably, in the punishment doled out by the criminal justice system, either incarceration or some other measures. P-Dog Knight, driving to Scribelight. P-Dog, do you need directions? I don't know that you know where I am. First stop for a while. Seems like a program for minor offenses, but not for violent crime, particularly murder. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I can think of maybe one restorative justice talk where the speaker at least implied a limit to where restorative justice could conceivably be practiced. But almost to a one, and our speaker included, they never say restorative justice practices make sense for third-degree misdemeanors and below, or something like that. They set a boundary, or I should say they never do set a boundary. And our speaker started out this conversation by listing violent crime as something within the wheelhouse of restorative justice. So if she's listing violent crime, then there really is no crime that is not subject in her mind to a benefit from restorative justice. Now, if I had a speaker come out and say, I think restorative justice practices make sense in schools and from minor offenses on downward, as an alternative to criminal justice system or criminal proceedings, restorative justice makes sense as an alternative to these crimes and below. Anything above this should be dealt with by the state, and any restorative programs that take place should be supplementary to those sentences or to those proceedings. If somebody came out and said that, I'd probably be on board in spirit. It all depends on the specifics, of course, but at least if they set that outline at the top, I might be able to go along with that. You know, like drug offenses and drug addiction offenses and things like that, right? Where the harm really is the individual doing it to themselves, having some sort of diversionary program. If they robbed somebody to feed their addiction and they found some way to do restitution versus incarceration, again, depending on the circumstances, I could see an argument made for that I wouldn't necessarily dismiss out of hand. But our speaker made the cardinal mistake, as far as I'm concerned, by setting the bar at the highest possible crime level there can be. You know, violent crime, you know, felonious assault and upwards at that point. So if she's setting the range all the way to the top of what we consider crimes in our world, there's not much room to maneuver at that point. So,
for empathy, for hope,
yeah,
repair.
Again, okay, well, you open the door. How does a rapist repair their crime against their victim? How does a murderer repair their crime against the family of the family of the victim? Where is the repair in serious violent crime? You brought it up. I want to hear an active example of where that happened. Please. I'm serious. I have waited presentation after presentation for someone to give me an active example of repair from either of those two categories of crime.
Even for connection.
Uh-huh.
And it's through this hard heart work that the worthiness of it becomes known, that very personal needs can be met.
Bring back my loved one. Bring back my loved one. That is a very personal need for the families of victims of murder. You know, where's the repair there? Bring back my physical wholeness, let's say, of a rape victim. Bring back my sense of trust. Bring back my sense of security. Bring back my sense of intimate comfort. Where's the repair there? I am open to being given an example, which doesn't necessarily mean it is always the rule, but I am open to being given an example. But you haven't provided one yet, have you? And no speaker to this point has.
And that amends can be made.
Uh-huh.
Where sometimes we realize that we're not that much different than one another.
Except for one is a criminal and the other one's not. Or one is the offender and one is the victim. One did something to the other person and the other person did nothing to the other person. Something like that, maybe? Yeah. Oh, we're all still human. Sure. We're all still human. But we're not that much different. You know. Yeah.
And that the people who caused harm may have also experienced harm.
That is not an excuse. Short of mental defect or completely being out of their mind from some previous incident or something, even then, that is not an excuse. That does not heal anything. Well, I was harmed as a kid, and that's why I harmed you. Maybe that works for some people. Maybe that's enough for some people to forgive and forget. I don't know. Personally, doesn't wash with me. Really doesn't. Save for other extenuating circumstances that I could only just imagine out of whole cloth, doesn't work for me.
And that they have more to offer than the harmful actions that they've committed.
Well, I hope so. If they've gone through the criminal justice system, they've served their time, made whatever restitution is required of them of law, and go forth in the rest of their lives to never harm anybody again, great. I begrudge no one who actually goes through the effort of changing how they operate in the world after having committed a wrong. I credit people who go the rest of their lives never, ever again committing a crime. That's great. But we're still on, or at least I'm still on the point of which, how do you heal? How do you restore the harm you've caused in the most serious instances? You haven't told us yet.
The late Norwegian criminologist and sociologist Nils Christie challenges us to consider what is relevant in matters of justice and who gets to decide.
Well, in a civilized society, you have a emotional insulation from doling out justice from the victim. This is something that I've heard several times before. Why isn't the victim or the victim's family more intimately involved, or the ones that set the punishment and so on? That's the whole sort of metaphor with the justices, the Lady Justice thing, where she's got a blindfold on, she's got a sword in one hand, scales on the other. In order to avoid a vigilante sort of informed process, there has to be a buffer. There has to be an insulation between the emotion of the person who has been harmed and the accused. There has to be a process, checks and balances, filters to go through to make sure that the person's emotions are not what is fueling the rush to justice. Now, obviously, our system is not perfect, and a lot of times we've seen systems and people and communities who have acted on emotion or on supposition or presumption, and innocent people have been prosecuted and or put on death row and or executed. Our system isn't perfect, but we need that process in between the victim and the accused to try to help and filter out the possibility that someone has been wrongfully accused, wrongfully arrested, and so on. Okay, that's why we have that process, fundamentally speaking. That's how we do it in a civilized society. Now, does it always work? No. Is it perfect? No. But if you want to see the difference between what we do versus a completely emotionally based, no insulation process, look at what happened in Chaz or the CHOP. And for those of you listening in the future who may not remember, look up Seattle during the George Floyd protests and see what happened in the Chaz or CHOP zone, wherein you had a self-appointed security force roaming the area, doling out justice as they saw fit, whether it meant robbing other people or murdering other people on a whim. That's the difference between a society that has a process of insulation from emotion and immediate reaction and one that does not. You know, it's the best we've come up with after thousands of years of trying to find as perfect a justice as we can create as human beings. So there's my preaching.
How do the decisions that our criminal justice system make for us impact outcomes and facilitate the needs of people and communities impacted by crime?
It's a case-by-case basis and an individual-by-individual assessment. You know, I can't count how many times I've seen a criminal sentenced to X number of years for a crime and the family being dissatisfied or the family being grateful. You know, I say the criminal justice system, it's never going to make everybody happy. It's never going to be perfect. Doesn't matter whether it's Canada or the US or elsewise. But like I say, for all its flaws, it's the best we've come up with. Case by case, individual assessments. Thank you, tall person. Hoy, y'all. Just got home from work and we'll watch in full later. Happy National Blueberry Muffin Day, everybody. I love blueberry muffins. I'll tell you why, real quick. Years and years ago, there was a ad that would play on the radio every morning when I woke up, because I had my alarm set to the radio and not the beeper. And so the radio would come on to get me awake for work in the day. And it was almost like clockwork because it was tuned to a national news channel. And they had this set, like, number of ads they'd play at that time of morning. And every day at the same time, the same ad would play. It was one of those public service type ads that talked about how antioxidants, which can be found in dark-skinned fruit, are good for you and help prevent Alzheimer's. And because my grandfather died from complications of Alzheimer's, I'm very attuned to treatments and or preventative measures to Alzheimer's. And one of the things they mentioned in that ad were like blueberries, as in the dark-skinned fruit. So after hearing this ad over and over and over again, as I woke up for work on days and days and days, I thought I should start eating more blueberries. And the most tasty, immediate source for me to get blueberries in the morning at work was to go down to the nearby Starbucks and get a blueberry muffin. And over the course of time, I gained a liking for blueberry muffins because of that ad. So advertisements sometimes work on me. So that's why I will celebrate Blueberry Muffin Day today. Thank you, tall person. And thank you, Zach Lives Matter Scribe. There's a TEDx with a rapist and his victim. Is there? Oh. Tweet me that one. Maybe I'll do that one tomorrow as a supplement to this. Okay.
And what roles do any of us have to play in matters of justice within our own communities?
I don't know. It depends on the crime or offense involved, I suppose.
How many of you had ever asked yourself these questions before?
Many, 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 many times, as my audience can attest.
Show of hands. Have you thought about this stuff?
I'm raising my hand.
I sure hadn't.
Oh.
But it got me thinking.
Oh.
Thinking about how much we entrust the extent of our safety and security into the hands of third-party systems designed to deliver justice for us, because that's just what we do.
Yes, as an alternative to exacting vigilante justice, yes, that is what we do in a civilized society. You're correct.
And it's not so much that we do, rather that we risk removing the expectations of ourselves to be proactive in matters of justice if we don't see how we can play a role in it.
Okay, now maybe I'm going a bit too far. Maybe I'm misunderstanding her, but is she now advocating for a vigilante justice system or bemoaning the fact that we don't have a more vigilante justice system?
And if we don't ask ourselves these kind of questions, if we don't pause to consider where and how do we fit?
You fit as a witness. I mean, for all intents and purposes, if you are a victim of crime, you fit as a witness to the crime. That is your role more often than not. Depending on the crime, depending on the circumstances, maybe the prosecutor will ask for your input. Maybe you'll have a victim's impact statement at the sentencing, something to that effect. But otherwise, you're a witness. You do not get to play the active participant in doling out justice. That is what separates us from a vigilante system, is that we have a due process, which someone is entitled to have their guilt proven. No matter what the witnesses or the alleged victims say, the accused has a due process right. Maybe I'm misunderstanding.
And don't get me wrong, these third-party institutions there to serve and protect us are valued and needed.
I'm going to make a prediction. But
more importantly, they're made up of people too. People who are members of our very own communities.
But
restorative justice isn't an either-or thing.
But
it's a together thing, a we thing.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there's not a but coming.
And we all want to feel safe, to have less crime, and to have order.
Yes, that is what marks a civilized society. It's true.
We want to hold people accountable, and we want healthier communities.
Is there not a but coming? Because it seems like she's leading up to one.
The responsibility to achieve these things doesn't land entirely on our police, our criminal justice system, our community agencies, or our governments. We as community members have a responsibility to participate and contribute to create the kind of safe, healthy, and connected communities we desire.
Sure. Either by advocating for changes or joining the police force or voting in representatives who will go the way that you want them to. Yeah, okay.
You and I, we have the skills, abilities, ideas, and resources to solve our own problems.
You have more faith in modern humanity than I do in that regard, then. But maybe it's different in Canada. I mean, I'm just talking as a cynical American.
And restorative justice can offer us a place where we can actively participate in matters of justice that impact us and our communities.
Tell me about rape and murder. You brought up violent crime. Give me an example. I mean, it's actually surprising to me that thus far she has not provided any, even biased statistics, not even any biased examples that would support her argument, which actually doesn't help anything. I mean, I'd appreciate even a biased source of supporting data on her part, but she hasn't even offered that yet.
Restorative justice can help us meet the goals that both our criminal justice system and our communities want to achieve.
Okay. What are those goals and how do both processes achieve them?
It can also help address the needs of people directly impacted by crime and the families, neighborhoods, schools, and workplaces that they go home to.
How? You need to give some more specifics. Just saying that they do or they will is not enough. How? Do you have an active example? In 10 minutes and 51 seconds since this presentation began, you have not offered an active, citable example of a successful restorative justice process. Why not?
These are the families that we have over for dinner, the neighborhoods in which we walk our dogs, the schools where which we drop off our children, and the workplaces where we work to achieve the means so that we can enjoy it all.
What does any of that have to do with criminal justice and or a restorative justice practice as supplementary to? Yes, communities are made up of people and families and neighbors and schools and business places. Very good. And I mean, let's say there were none of those things. Let's say two people encounter each other in a desert, miles and miles and miles away from anybody, and a crime is committed. What does any of that have to do with that crime and restorative justice?
When people come together to work through a shared difficult experience.
A shared difficult experience. So when the violent offender comes together with their victim in a shared difficult experience, sorry, whose experience was difficult? I know, maybe I'm going too far here, but to extend the amount of empathy that seems to be implied here to the perpetrator in the same fashion as I would the victim, starting to get on my nerves just a little bit.
It can foster a collective willingness to invest time, care, and energy towards the matters that impact them.
The people who should be investing the most time, energy, and so on towards restorative justice should be the perpetrators. Ultimately, they should be the ones making the most effort because they are the ones that caused the harm. Restorative justice may require an equitable attendance of both sides, but in my book, the amount of effort should be weighted heavily on the perpetrator. Or is that not how I'm supposed to see it?
We begin to see how a restorative approach to crime can not only be a valuable potential for us all, but we see how it can impact the everyday ways we engage in discussions, problem solve, plan, endure change and hardship, lift one another up, and live well together in community.
In the absence of some active examples, you're just talking in abstractions and platitudes. You've given us nothing except wishful thinking. You need to give us something concrete. And I might be mistaken, but I think this might be the first speaker on restorative justice that hasn't even offered up at least the barest statistical evidence, whether cited or not, to back up their argument.
We begin to prioritize nurture and repair relationships when we come to understand how we're all interconnected.
How we're all interconnected. Okay. How is the stranger rapist interconnected with their victim, save for the fact that at one point in time, their paths intersected? You're the one that brought up violent crime as an inclusive part of your restorative justice plan, so do tell.
With some support, intention, and some good heart work, we can use the means that I know we all have to get back to basics and take a leading role when things go wrong.
Okay, I'm circling word salad. I'm sorry, I've been neglecting the bingo card. I've just been enthralled with her, I don't know, sort of obscure and obfuscated arguments. We'll go over the bingo card shortly, guys, and I'll take arguments for and against as we proceed. It's another few seconds.
Through restorative justice.
Yeah.
We have what it takes to respond more effectively and meaningfully to crime and harm. Crime and harm that affects the people in the communities that we call home. I know we can do that, Peace River, because all we need is right here. All we need is each other. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Before I say anything else, let's go over the bingo card real quick. Plays victim. I don't think she ever categorized herself as a victim. I mean, she decided to feel guilty after her friend's mom criticized her for something that happened 20 years ago. So I'm willing to take arguments on that one, but I'm a little iffy on that one. Takes credit for something done by others. Can't say she ever did that. White supremacy privilege, never brought it up. Microaggressions, never brought it up. Wage gap, no. Patriarchy, no. New buzz phrase or buzzword, no. Systemic institutional, I mean, she said criminal justice system, but that's not usually the context in which I'd circle that. Like if they're talking about systemic sexism or racism or something else. So again, I'll take arguments for or against that one. Toxic, no. Anecdote that probably never happened. I can believe that her friend's mom was petty enough to sit on that gripe for 20 years. I've known people like that. And that anecdote was not self-aggrandizing or wasn't like my 5-year-old came up to me and asked me for information on, you know, the collision of atoms or something. So yeah, I believe that. Leaves out vital context. Yeah, she never gave us any statistics, no active examples of how this restorative process works or has been successful. I'm circling that one. Speaker should not be in current occupation or position. She never brought up what her job is, as far as I can recall. I mean, she's advocating for restorative justice, but I don't believe she ever said, in my job as blah, blah, blah. So unless I missed something, I don't have anything to base that one off of. Marginalization, no. School to prison pipeline, I mean, I thought she might go there, but that's not where she went. So can't make that one myself. Make something about race, sex, etc. for no reason. Best of my knowledge, she never brought up race or sex. So yeah. Rape culture, no. Feminism, no. Benevolent condescension, not that I can think of, or at least not that I would attribute to it. Equity, no. A list. I mean, she never said there are 3 things or something like that. Well, no, she did say there were 2 things, didn't she, at one point? Yeah, I'm going to circle that one. She did say that there was like 2 things to keep in mind, something like that. Cultural appropriation, no. Gratuitous pausing for effect. She paused quite a long time there near the end, but it seemed to me more like she was trying to remember what her spiel was and not that she was trying to go for an effect. So that's a judgment call on my part. That's how I interpreted it. Anyway, chat, if you have comments, questions, observations, corrections, or otherwise to provide, put them in the chat now. Scrolling up a bit. Renovescio, if an ISIS member cuts off the head of his or her victim, there is only one victim, one victimizer. There is no shared experience where each is a form of equal victim. Well, in restorative justice, you could make the argument that the victims are the family of the person having their head cut off, or the loved ones or friends of the person who had their head cut off. So there are people who are directly victimized from that. So again, in a restorative justice model, you would have victims who could conceivably confront the victimizer. And again, I'm just going by the restorative justice model. Assassin of the Gray, Scribelight, what if my definition of justice against those who wrong me is blood for blood revenge? Well, again, that's why we have a criminal justice system, to put an insulation between you and the perpetrator. Because your desire for a particular outcome is not necessarily what we as a society have decided is most appropriate. And that can seem like it's unjust and unfair, and sometimes it does end up being that way, maybe objectively or otherwise, but that's why we have a criminal justice system and not a vigilante justice system. Let's see. Seniko, God damn it, why is the psychological fucked up asshole in my province? I don't know. I didn't know where this was taking place until she mentioned Canada, and I was like, oh yeah, grand is spelled with an E. I mean, it's not impossible that somewhere in America has a Grand Prairie spelled with an E, but it's not common, I don't think. Assassin of the Gray, she is right. It takes no effort at all to tie a rope for a criminal. Again, so long as they've gone through due process, but even then, and but then I'm not in favor of the death penalty, and I've actually recorded a brief little video on that subject, but that's for another time. Let's see, and then chat jumped, so if I miss something, guys, please put it back in there again. Deck Tran, academic studies nowadays are nothing but propaganda. Depends on the school, depends on the teacher, depends on the class. Sar Jim, she's the director of the Restorative Justice Center on Alberta. Okay, well, in that sense, then she's perfectly suited for her job. I mean, again, it's and I have done so, obviously, during the course of this. It can be argued whether restorative justice is an effective solution to anything. I mean, I do question whether or not, if that is her profession, effectively, she didn't give a very good presentation arguing for or in favor of her philosophy. No active examples, no statistics that she could name off to try to bolster her narrative or her argument. Even if they were completely friendly to her argument, someone in that position you would think would at least have a memorized 30-second elevator pitch if they had to try to get someone to donate money or something. So you know what? Actually, in that regard, since she was not very convincing, I'm going to circle speaker should not be in current occupation or position. Because if she's the best advocate they have available for their organization or their philosophy, she didn't do an effective job of arguing her point to me. You would think that she would have some success stories immediately at hand to offer up, even if it kept certain details private or something. But she didn't. So I'll circle that one. All right. Let's see. Renovescio, the push for restorative justice is just a sock-just attempt to take over the West's justice systems for power and profit, just as defund the police is really about redirecting funds to their pockets. Here's the thing, and this is something that I always do sort of internally when I watch these sort of talks or things that seem a little off-key to me. Unless I'm given reason to believe otherwise, I give the benefit of the doubt that the speaker is talking from sincerity. Like, I don't have any reason to believe that our speaker's motivations here are sincere, that there's no necessarily shady ulterior motive to what she's saying. Because I still believe in sort of the Dr. Doom theory of quote unquote evil in a lot of instances in humankind, that more often than not, there's no evil intention or desire in a person, even if their ideas or what they're advocating for are ultimately destructive or harmful, unless I'm given some reason to believe otherwise. I don't doubt their good intentions. That obviously does not excuse the old adage, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, but I didn't see anything in this talk to think that I was listening to a faker or some kind of hustler or grifter. So as far as I know, I believe that she sincerely believes that her philosophy is meant for good. So I can't fault her for that, not inherently. And again, maybe I'm being too generous, but that's just my nature. Let's see. Sarjim says, but she can't explain what she does in her job. Well, I mean, she never brought up her job, but knowing now what her job is in relation to this talk, you would think that she would be the most effective argumentarian to her point. And she wasn't. In fact, I'd say that compared to many other restorative justice speakers I've listened to, she was the least effective because she didn't even bother coming up with any examples or statistics or any reasonable arguments. It was all just platitudes and wishful thinking. So if she's the director of an organization that promotes this stuff, those kind of organizations have to do fundraising, and she didn't even have an effective 30-second elevator pitch for me to even consider donating to her cause. So, Assassin the Gray, Scribely, please tell me again how the woman laying raped and strangled in an alley is somehow morally superior to the woman explaining to police how she shot her attacker. What? I don't understand the question. Self-defense versus justice doled out by the state? I don't know what you mean. I'm confused. I don't know. I don't know what I'm meant to answer to that question. Seniko, the closest we have to restorative justice is specifically for natives in the healing lodges, and they can be accepted back into the reservations, the reserves. Well, that's what one of the very first speakers I ever did a video on this was a previous TEDx talk, which was actually a scripted one. And if you look up if you just go to my channel, click on the little magnifying glass and search for the phrase, a world without prisons. The first instance of that, or the oldest instance of that, was the most detailed explanation or I guess a sales pitch for what a true restorative justice process would look like. Of all the speakers that I've done, at least that lady laid out an entire plan including buildings and systems and all types of stuff. It didn't convince me, but at least she was there with a plan and a sales pitch. And so, but she mentioned in that talk, that's why I'm talking about this, she mentioned that talk that she learned about restorative justice from the practices of Native Americans and their culture. So, yeah, I could believe that. And, if that works for Native American cultures and communities, I guess I can't fault them. But given the sales pitches I've been given so far by everybody saying that we should adopt those practices in the modern Western world, I haven't been convinced yet. Not as a replacement. Assassin the Gray, Scribe Light. That is the argument that these do-gooders are pushing, that criminals must be protected and healed at the unspoken cost to their victims. Well, yes. I mean, so coming at it from the perspective of a restorative justice process is occurring as a supplement to the criminal justice system, as in the perpetrator has gone through due process, been tried, convicted, etc. That their responsibility, their guilt has been determined by due process of law. And after that fact, if they want to participate in restorative justice, and the victim does as well, I can't fault either side for that, right? But as far as there shouldn't be self-defense in the midst of an attack or something. I mean, as long as we're not talking about someone was attacked and then they take a gun and go hunting for that person and then decide to take justice in their own hands, because as we've seen more often than not, and not necessarily good, they either end up taking someone's life unjustly because it was, mistaken identity, or rightfully so, not in the heat of the moment, not as a matter of self-defense, even if they did end up shooting or hurting the person that hurt them. In the absence of the immediate moment of the attack, the person doing the harm is now the criminal, even if the person they're attacking is a criminal. It's all about circumstances. So anyway, I'm sorry I misunderstood. I thought you were directing that like at me or something. I was like, what? Anyway. A couple more things, guys, then I'll display my bingo card, and then we'll wrap this up. Sergeant, we could have a world without prisons if we had a world without criminals. True. If we had a utopia where no one ever did any wrong to anyone else, we'd never have a need for prisons or a criminal justice system. And we all know that that is impossible. I mean, we don't have laws in place because we all assume humans are infallible. Let's see. Faithless. Native tribes could also banish someone, leaving them to survive alone in the wild, a likely death sentence. True. Exile, banishment used to be an alternative to or part of a criminal quote-unquote justice system in the olden days. Can't really do that today, at least not in most Western civilizations and nations and such, because you walk 3 miles down the road and there's a new place to live, that kind of thing. So short of being sent alone into the desert without anyone knowing where you are, and even then, anyway, yeah, exile and banishment makes more sense for stories from bygone ages or sci-fi movies. Deck transcribe, these people want to have show trials. I don't know what they want to have. I mean, between healing circles, healing huts, frank discussions, conversations of restoration. I mean, the most dyed-in-the-wool of these activists don't want trials at all. They just want a glorified conversation between the presumed offender and the alleged victim, in the absence of any due process for the gathering of evidence, the weighing of evidence versus an argument against, and so on. They're advocating for essentially a warm and cuddly vigilante system. which of course will not remain warm and cuddly for very long once you throw in human emotion and human reflexes for vengeance or redress. So yeah, and few of the speakers that I've listened to have ever acknowledged the inherent reflexes and instincts of people who have been wronged, and then say that those instincts should not be addressed fully in a restorative justice process. They seem to avoid the end extremes of human behavior, whether it's on the part of the offender or in the desires of the offended. They never seem to address how do you cover both of those extremes in a restorative justice process. All right, guys, I'm going to save my bingo card here so I don't overwrite the other one. If you have any final observations or arguments or anything else you'd like to say, please put them in the chat now while I prepare the bingo card for display. And just as a plug, if you'd like to hear more from me or Ranting Monkey or Satsu 2 Cents, you can find us all tonight on Ranting Monkey's channel at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for Lords of the Night, where we'll talk about the news of the day, news stories that you submit, what we've been up to one way or the other on the intertubes, and then your questions, comments, conspiracy theories, and the like. Let's see, let me get that here. Okay, there's that. And I close this window, and then I share this window, and then everything should be fine. Yes, so there's my completed bingo card, guys, for tonight's or today's show. Not a bingo. We came a little bit close, but this was a very focused conversation. It didn't go all over the place. I was kind of surprised that she didn't bring up some of the other concepts, given that, classically speaking, Canadian activists are not shy about throwing out many buzzwords, buzz phrases, or general accusations of things. But that's what I got. Your ludicrous lunatic says buzzword. It has to be a new buzzword or buzz phrase. Restorative justice is not a new buzzword or buzz phrase. That's kind of old hat at this point. They have to be trying to conjure their own white fragility book deal or something, and I didn't hear anything there for that. Zach Lives Matter. No rape culture today? I'm shocked. Well, no, she didn't even bring up specifically murder or rape. I don't think she ever said the words. She just said violent crime. She said that as part of the spectrum within which restorative justice could operate, which again opens the door for any crime. Anything from violent crime on downward is now fair game for questioning on the restorative justice process. But she didn't answer any of those possible concerns. So there you go, guys. But yeah, so once again, I keep searching for a restorative justice argument that is reasonable and or makes sense and or I can agree with. I mean, I could make a restorative justice argument that I could agree with, but that's not up to me. That's not my place in the world, so to speak. That's for those people who are advocating for it to convince me. And if this lady is the director of a restorative justice association or organization, she did a very poor job, in my estimation, in a almost 13-minute presentation. But anyway, guys, that's it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for your participation. Thank you so much for your generosity, those of you who donated. It'll all go towards horrible things I'll put in my body, like continued pepper jacks, as I try to anesthetize myself from sometimes the inanity, stupidity, and contradiction I get out of some of these talks. I hope to do one again tomorrow. If somebody has the link to the TEDx that shows one between the rapist and their victim, tweet that to me. I'll take a quick look, and maybe I'll do that one as a follow-up to this tomorrow. We'll see. But anyway, guys, hope you all have a good rest of your Saturday and your weekend. Please stay safe and well. If you're not well, please get well soon. And I'll see you tonight on Lords of the Night, or otherwise in the next TEDXcellence.